So we've talked about the emergence of the modern Iranian states. We've also talked about the Iranian Revolution of 1979. Uh, I think it's time to fast forward to today and talk a little bit about what's going on in Iran today. Uh, as you know, in the 1980s, Iran and Iraq fought a long and bloody war. Um, the Saddam Hussein thought that the Iranian Revolution had destabilized the country, that the armed forces were kind of in disarray. Remember that the armed forces of Iran prior to 1979 were very much in the camp of the Shah and therefore not necessarily loyal to the new regime. So as a result, Saddam Hussein thought it would be a good time to try and gain some territory in Iran, some of the disputed territory between the two countries, maybe some oil fields. And so he launched an attack, but although initially the attacks went pretty well, the war quickly developed into a stalemate with thousands of casualties on both sides, and eventually both countries, exhausted in 1988, finally agreed to a ceasefire more or less without any territory gained or lost. Um, but I want to focus more on modern politics. The One of the questions that has emerged, I think, from comparative politics over the past, say, 20 years about Iran is whether Iran is a democracy. And I think something could be said on both sides of this question. On the one side, I think you can say that Iran definitely has competitive elections. There are lots of candidates. There's wide participation on the part of the people, and different parties win. That is to say, there's alternation in political power. The president can come from different parties. Different parties can dominate the majlis. From that perspective, you have something that looks like a democracy. Elections are frequent; they're not delayed. So they occur at regular intervals. It's not the case that the party in power manipulates the elections, at least as far as we know, or the timing of the elections anyway. Uh, there's also relatively free public criticism of the government's economic and foreign policy. That is to say, there's some debate about what's to be done, and so there are moderates and hardliners, and so from that point of view, you see free and open debate. You think democracy, and of course, levels of education are going to be fairly high in Iran, and so that suggests that you have an informed electorate. You don't have an electorate that's being swayed by elites, any more so than any other electorate, shall we say. On the negative side, though, and some things that make people think that Iran's not truly a democracy, or at least not fully a democracy, is that there are some limits on electoral competition. There are some political parties, like the Communist Party, are banned, and candidates tend to be pre-screened by the religious authorities. In every election cycle, some candidates are not allowed to run because they don't meet certain religious tests. And so as a result, you have something less than open competition. It's competition, but between a fairly narrow set of candidates. Moreover, criticism of Islam, criticism of the Islamic Revolution in Iran is illegal, so there's no putting the regime in question, and so some people have thought that that is a limitation that carries Iran outside the realm of democracies. Moreover, education in the country, even though levels of education are fairly high, education is designed to indoctrinate people into Shia Islam in particular. Religion and education are very much mixed. It's not a secular public education. So while levels of education are fairly high, the content of that education is not neutral by any means, and is not certainly designed to foster, shall we say, critical thought about the regime itself. So you've got some mixed things, and to add to this, in 2008 there was a very controversial and hotly debated election where for a while it looked like a reformist candidate was going to win, a candidate that's much more moderate towards the West, towards Israel, uh, towards social issues, supported by the youth, particularly the urban youth. And that candidate ran against Mohammed Ahmadinejad, who was the conservative candidate, who was very much anti-Israel, very much going around making friends with North Korea and Venezuela and other countries that are not considered good citizens in the international community. And so, that election was hotly contested. Ahmadinejad ended up winning that election, and a lot of people cried foul. People were worried their elections got rigged. Uh, Again, hard to tell, but a lot of people on the ground thought that the elections were manipulated. So, again, the question becomes: is Iran a democracy? There's obviously some democratic elements to the Iranian system, but there's still a lot of doubt as to whether we want to call it a truly full-fledged democracy. On the other hand, the question is are we being too Western, too liberal? Do all democracies have to be liberal democracies? All democracies impose limits to what the people can do to one another via the democratic process. The United States has a Bill of Rights, for example, which are liberal limits on democracy. Iran has Sharia law, which is a more conservative religious limits on what democracy can accomplish. So, the question remains open. Uh, okay, what about social problems? Well, Iran's obviously, like many countries, is facing lots of social problems, but some things stand out with Iran, particularly youth unemployment. So there's a demographic transition in Iran. A demographic transition is that period of time between when the death rate, the mortality rate in the country begins to fall thanks to improvements in medical technology and access to medical care, and the time when the birth rate starts falling. Uh, Most countries that have gone through economic growth and have modernized have gone through a demographic transition where you have a large growth spurt in the population due to fast falling mortality rates but no fall in the birth rate. Uh, so women continue to have 5, 6 kids, but all of these kids now survive till adulthood, and life expectancies are lengthening. And so, once again, you have rapid growth in the population. Now, rapid growth in population, this has been going on for some time. So this demographic transition added to some labor market rigidities yield youth unemployment. Now, labor market rigidity here just simply means that people don't move in and out of jobs very fast. And typically this is because there are rules against firing people. That is to say, you have to give people a lot of due process before you can fire them, and so it just makes it generally difficult to lay people off, which means that employers as a whole will not have much of an incentive to hire people if they are not sure that they can keep them on for a long period of time. So what this means is that there's not a lot of jobs out there. People who have jobs are very insecure and they're trying to hang on to them. People who don't have jobs don't face great prospects, or if they face prospects, it's not in the legal sector, it's in the illegal sector of the economy, which of course means that you don't get a lot of benefits if you're in the illegal sector because you don't report your income and you don't pay into the Social Security system. So you have a lot of youth unemployment. Actually, another contributor to youth unemployment, which I didn't put up here in the slides, but is worth noting, is that many countries in the Middle East that have excesses of population that are going through this demographic transition are able to send their population abroad to other countries to work, particularly countries in the Gulf states that are labor poor but have a lot of capital, have a lot of oil money, and have a lot of economic activity going on, but have labor shortages. They're more than happy to receive influxes of foreign labor. Of course, and if you're in the Maghreb, then you might be going towards Europe. You might hope for a good job there. But the point is that there's that safety valve that youth can go abroad to work if there are no job prospects at home. Now, because of the embargo on Iran, because Iran has exit visas, meaning that you need permission to leave the country, the it's difficult for young Iranians to go abroad to find jobs, and so as a result, all of those problems and all of those people get bottled up at home, creating a kind of unpleasant political environment. Now, all of this makes it difficult, particularly for young men, to get married, and for women to find young men with good prospects. It's often the case in many countries that men with poor with poor job prospects don't have good marriage prospects as well, and of course that creates a lot of resentment among young men in Iran as well as elsewhere because not only can they not get jobs, but this means that they have a hard time getting married. And of course, in a society that's still fairly conservative, where premarital relations are very much frowned upon, this creates a fair amount of frustration among young men in Iran, where it doesn't seem like they can catch a break, and it doesn't also seem like they control their own destiny. It seems like they're at the mercy of circumstances beyond their own control, and of course, that's never comfortable for anyone. So, for all these reasons, these are some sort of deep social problems, and these frustrations led to the Green Revolution, right? They led to the endorsement of reformist candidates in the election of 2008, the ultimately unsuccessful Green Revolution. Now, another issue that I think crops up, and it certainly cropped up during this 2008 Green Revolution, is the relationship in Iran between religion and politics. Iran is one of the only overtly theocratic regimes in the world. That is to say, the right to rule is clearly derived from Shia Islam. The tenets of Shia Islam serve as a kind of constraint on what democratic majorities may do in Iran. And this mix, that's been around since 1979, has not always been for the better. And it's kind of ironic that in the West, liberals often worry about the mixing of church and state because they fear that the state will come to serve sectarian interests and deprive religious minorities of freedom, right? So the worry is that the state will in some ways be corrupted or tainted by undue religious influence. But in the theocratic regime of Iran, many observers have concluded nearly the opposite, that it's religion that's getting corrupted by involvement with politics. So how does this work? Well, many people believe in Iran that religious hierarchies, including the imams and the ayatollahs, are being corrupted by political considerations. They're taking sides in political debates not for purely religious reasons, but for also political reasons, or their political calculations is influencing their religious scholarship and their religious decision making. And so, because of this, there's a lot of skepticism of the religious authorities that seemed beyond reproach in the years prior to 1979. They were the oppositional figures to the regime. They were in many ways the moral conscience of the regime. These these religious figures, after the revolution, after several decades of being mixed up in political intrigue and the necessities of staying in power, have in some ways become much less pure. And so there's this contrast of the current era under Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, which is seen as more corrupt, versus the sort of old regime of Ayatollah Khomeini, who was very much the architect of the revolution and the Grand Ayatollah after the revolution, where Khomeini is seen as pious and above and beyond reproach. His successors are seen in a much more jaundiced light. So one example might be the religious establishment being extremely vocal about the plight of Muslims in Israel, but staying fairly silent about the plight of Muslims in Chechnya, which is a province of Russia, and China, in western China in particular. Why? Well, of course, Russia and China are two of the countries that are still willing to trade with Iran despite the embargo, whereas whereas Israel is, of course, very much an enemy and very much an ally of the West, and so they feel free to criticize the one, but don't seem to want to criticize the other, and this seems inconsistent to many devout Muslims and many people in the Iranian public. Furthermore, it seems like a lot of horrible things are being done in the name of religion, particularly in state prisons and on the part of paramilitary forces in Iran. The Basiji, for example, who are these sort of auxiliary units of young men who take it upon themselves to go and find young men and women who are holding hands and make sure that they're married. This these kinds of harassments and in some cases torture in the name of religion seems like blasphemy to many conservative as well as liberal critics of the regime. And so, as a result, religion there's a kind of skepticism about religious authorities that just wasn't there in the 1970s. And so it doesn't seem like well, it seems like the marriage between religion and politics in Iran has not produced quite the effect that was intended. Okay, so that's all I have for modern Iranian politics. If you have any questions, feel free to get in touch.